So thank you very much for this invitation to take part in this great conference where Renata and I are very happy to share here our hypothesis about a Gorgon effect. While working on this paper, we have changed the main focus of our inquiry, so the title slightly changed. We will talk about multimodal emotional responses and rhetoric strategies. So we will share today our hypothesis concerning the multimodality of the emotional response triggered in readers or audiences by an author through the usage of different narrative, rhetoric, and dramaturgic strategies. To explain our claim, we will present a case study, the 22nd scene from a play by Heinrich von Kleist, Penthesilea, which introduces the rhetoric use of theikoscopy and of the messenger's report. These rhetorical means present a character assuming the role of a witness, recounting harrowing events to other dramatis personae and to the audience. In our perspective, these dramaturgic and rhetoric strategies reveal the multimodal quality of emotional arousal and the relevant effect that specific emotional affordances, as we have defined them, have on the process of art reception, influencing the meaning-making process and the evaluative process of the reader audiences. We will then conclude with a broader reflection on the emotional arousal induced by rhetorical strategies, which we consider to be the fundamental element of the aesthetic effectiveness of a text. It is, of course, beyond the scope of this presentation to tackle the thriving fields of studies about emotions in real life and their difference from aesthetic emotions. Already the definition and the dynamic of aesthetic emotions is a very broad field, and so broad that in order to define the meaning, the origin of the meaning, and inquiring the possibility of defining and testing aesthetic emotion both in a qualitative and a quantitative way, we are organizing the next Cognitive Features in the Arts and Humanities International Conference in Catania about aesthetic emotions. And now coming to the methodological grounding of our study, we have as background studies in cognitive poetics, neuroaesthetics, empirical psychology, the phenomenology of emotions, four cognition theories with a particular focus on Vittorio Gallese embodied simulation theory and Douglas Cairns' idea present in the upcoming papers empathy and sympathy as responses to verbal and narrative narratives. Such openness and transdisciplinary approaches, in our opinion, necessary to hope to reach an answer or a theory about emotions where the collaboration of human scholars and scientists is really necessary to get some new and fresh views. In contrast to David Herman, who asserted that readers comprehend complex narratives relying on a limited number of textual or discourse cue, we think that emotional responses are multimodal and can be primed by a manifold of strategies that can sometimes also overlap. Furthermore, we assert that the rhetorical manipulation of the stimuli deeply affects the emotional response, both in quality and quantity, as we can also verify through test this assumption, to the point that the whole meaning-making process and the evaluative process can be influenced by it. Now, to delve into this very complex issue and taking for granted that all the participants have different backgrounds here, so we would like to present a very precise and clear case study. The second scene from Heinrich von Kleist's tragic drama, as it is translated in English, Penthesilea, in which we encounter both the dramaturgic technique of theikoscopy and of the messenger's report. What is theikoscopy? You can see it from this schema. Theikoscopy means viewing from the walls, and is a recurring narrative strategy in ancient Greek tragedy by which a character reports what he or she is watching from a privileged position. The messenger report, the messenger was out of the scene and now coming in scene, brings to ears and not to the eyes of the audience crucial scenes already happened and not represented on stage. Traditionally, and also in today's common sense, the use and the function of a messenger on stage was to moderate the effect of violence on the audience for the sake of beauty or for catharsis. But if you look at the role of a messenger, that is a witness, in the Greek tragedy from a cognitive point of view, I think that it is clear that through this figure, the author's intention was to prime the audience to make their own picture of the reported events in their minds, responding to the emotional state of the messenger, which is the very important point. So, as we can also see from Barrett. Now we come to our case study very briefly. This was a play written by Heinrich von Kleist in 1808 that was put on scene only in 1867 because this play was faced with resistance and revulsion because of the violence of the feelings and also of the scenes happening in this play, and because of the conflicting emotions such as love and hate and eros and death. Kleist refers to the tradition of the Amazons, who are a society of human warriors taking part in the Trojan War, and they are expected to engage in the battle in order to fulfill the customs of the Amazons, which dictate that an Amazon can have a lover only after having defeated a worthy warrior on the battlefield. Now Kleist introduces a significant twist in this plot. Penthesilea and Achilles fall in love at once. This brings to a series of misunderstandings which should be solved through a final false prearranged duel. The duel was agreed to come out in favor of Penthesilea, who would then be able to follow the Amazons' rules and take Achilles as her lover. The scene takes place in a valley that is overlooked by a hill, and the audience see on the hill the Amazons making their preparations for the rose ceremony. Afterwards, the audience is confronted with the report of two eyewitnesses, Terpi, who first watches the event from the top of the hill, and Meroe, who enters the stage soon after and reports what she has seen from the opposite side of the hill. What is now distinctive for a witness from a cognitive point of view? A witness is an individual who, when asked to provide an account, has already undergone a cognitive processing of the action or event, experienced emotional reactions to it, and internally evaluated those emotional responses. As a result, the witness is capable of delivering an account through a more or less organized narration. This narration primes a common focus of attention, and the report creates what Vittorio Gallese considers to be a shared intersubjective space or a shared manifold of intersubjectivity. In other words, always with Vittorio Gallese, the witness report is the result of an integration. That means the independent and co-emergent occurrence of several fundamental processing constitutive of an emotional arousal. The schema here, which refers to Antonio Damasio's theory, can give an idea of all the processes which we think are co-emergent. The witness report in some way transforms the narration of the event in what we here define as an emotional affordance. And emotional affordances, according to Mayel, who was the first empirical psychologist who was inquiring in literary text from the emotional point of view, as emotional affordances offer a pre-structuring of the meaning of the text in question, and in our opinion, they are constitutive of literacy. Now, what is peculiar to the dramaturgical and rhetorical quality of our scene?
So now back to Penthesilea and to the drama. Clavist highlights in a sort of zoom effect the facial expressions of the witnesses as a means of nonverbal communication by introducing the reference to the Gorgon and her petrifying expression. And here I quote from the drama, Terpi, who had ascended to the hill with horror. "I call upon you, you dreadful gods of hell, witness what I now behold." And the high priestess, she looks as though she were beholding Medusa. And later, Meroe enters the scene. "Oh, you holy priestess of Diana, and you, pure daughters of Mars, listen, I am the African Gorgon, and turn you into stone." The effect of this strategy aligns with the idea that exposure to facial expressions prompts an internal mimicry response in readers or spectators. This happens through the activation of the mirror neuron system and of what Vittorio Gallese defines a liberated embodied simulation. The unconscious effect triggered by the mimicry may be defined in terms of what Douglas Cairns defines as emotional convergence or artistic exchange of the reader-spectator with a witness. And how is this realized within Kleist's play is the next question. So, as we have seen, to amplify the emotional response of the reader audience, the author introduces a reference, that to the Gorgon. This figure first emerged in the early 7th century BC and symbolizing the monstrosity and embodying the essence of pure and irrational terror. Medusa has the ability to turn others to stone with her gaze. Consistently, the reference to Medusa evokes her own turning into stone while gazing at her own reflection in the mirror-like shields of Perseus. The Gorgon is a culturally predetermined dynamic image that encapsulates condensed somatic expressions of emotional life. In Warburg's terminology, this is a pathos formel. The reference to a pathos formel triggers the reader's audience to activate an emotional inference, since pathos formels serve as prototypical and primordial images that condense complex emotional experiences of human beings. This process occurs as a result of the pathos former profound impact on the embodied experience of the reader image beholder, wherein the energetic qualities of motions and actions inscribed within the pathos formal resonate and reverberate within their own bodily engagement. The result of this induced strategic inference shortens and enhances the emotional convergence of the reader audience with the witness. Then Kleist introduces another rhetorical cue. The report given by the two witnesses is narratively structured in alignment with the rhetorical principles of enargeia. Enargeia refers to the quality of a text or the description intended to vividly bring the subject matter to life, triggering the reader's or listener's imagination within a strong and immersive sensory experience, enabling them to imaginatively visualize and create own images. In our case, Terpi begins her account deviating from any chronological order of the events. Instead, she begins with the climax, placing the focus on the most horrifying image, Penthesilea biting and tearing apart Achilles' body, ordering her hounds to join in. Terpi, I read the quote. Penthesilea, she lies, joined by the fierce hounds, she who was born of a human womb, and tears the limbs of Achilles to pieces. This narrative choice intends to heighten the emotional intensity of the storytelling, immediately captivating the audience with a startling and vivid image. This narrative choice intends to heighten the emotional intensity of this vivid image. And the same is made by Meroe. In her turn, Meroe offers a concise and fragmented account of the same climatic scene, enhancing it with gruesome details that emphasize the sensory and physical aspects of the action and giving rise to a process of emotional immersion. She recounts how Penthesilea incited her dogs against her prey, calling them by name, and there is a series of exclamatory phrases, as you can see here in the quotation. And then Meroe vividly portrays Penthesilea's actions from her forceful grip, greifen, and savage tearing, reißen, of Achilles' body to the shocking moment when she sank her teeth into his pallid chest, causing blood to drip from her mouth and hands. And I read the second part of the quote. She strikes her teeth, tearing the armor from his body. She strikes her teeth into his pale chest. She, together with her dogs, Oxus and Sphinx, each biting into his right, into his left. As I appeared, blood dripped from her mouth and hands. What is supposed to occur in the audience when triggered by a threefold stimulus constituted by the facial expression, activating mirror neurons and embodied simulation, the impactful use of a powerful pathos formal as an inference, and the vividness of the reported account based on energeia. This is our hypothesis. We think that this specific dramaturgic asset of the witness report provides a multimodal emotional stimulus consisting of three primary emotional affordances reinforcing one another. And so we have emotional convergence due to the facial mimicry, emotional inference due to the pathos former of the Gorgon, the inference, and the emotional vividness due to the energeia of the report and the priming of the imagination of the audience. This complex leads to what we define a process of multimodal emotional resonance, which has the effect to dampen the subjective cognitive processing in favor of a higher emotional arousal or attunement and a strong imaginative engagement. So many modern rehearsals of this play have put on stage the dramatic scene of Penthesilea, not by Penthesilea biting Achilles' chest, but not through the witness report, but putting on scene the Penthesilea doing this act. And this has not improved very much the artistic result of the play. And for instance, this could be a possible empirical study to see if there is a difference by the witness report or the putting on scene of the act. And we don't think that this choice, this director choice, has improved very much the emotional involvement of the audience, which sometimes feel drawn back from the horrific scene, actually. The rhetoric means of the witness improve their participation, of the participation of the audience, because the audience has to fill in the lacking visual information with their imagination. They are elicited by in an emotional participation to the witness report. This means, according to David Mile, that the rhetoric and linguistic features determine the emotional valence, and that this valence is the key in pre-structuring the meaning of the text as a whole. Now, summing up, the dramaturgic and rhetoric arrangement of the scene is meant to heighten the audience emotional multimodal simulation in our hypothesis by compelling to emotionally respond to the witness mimicry, but also by activating the imagination to respond to the emotional inference, in this case the Gorgons, and vividly creating the image corresponding to the energeia of the witness's narration. Therefore, the stimulus of the witness's report is dramaturgically and rhetorically manipulated in order to prioritize the emotional involvement over the detached analysis or judgment which comes afterwards. And this the result is that the audience is primed to completely emotionally converge with the witness's viewpoint and his or her emotional state. The rhetoric strategies employed by the author are therefore to be considered as emotional affordances, triggering the audience's emotional arousal and the imagination, encouraging them to immerse themselves more profoundly in a multidimensional sensory experience. Generalizing our case study, we conclude that the main aim of an author is to influence the perceiver's reaction by manipulating the stimuli in order to primarily evoke emotional response or eventually cognitive ones, but manipulating the stimuli and therefore manipulating the response. This amplification of the emotional response is functional to achieve a more complex and emotionally enhanced process of sense-making, which occurs in an intersubjective dimension rooted in the bodily, physical, biological, phenomenological, and experiential nature of the human being. At the same time, we experience an enhanced sense of our being a self that is able to resonate with other selves, with other emotional experiences. By experiencing an enhanced sense of being a self, able to resonate and emotionally converge with other selves, is the necessary premise to develop a positive social behavior. In this sense, the exposure to art and literature is to be considered as a necessary exercise of our brain-body system to become empathic and active and a positive member of a social community, or so we hope. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your talk.